Hello everyone, Chris Petri here. Welcome back. We are having fun. We're doing a nice coastal scene here. It's just a lot of fun to be here and making some videos. I'm using a different palette today, so those of you that join me, are familiar with my site and you're here all the time, then you're kind of familiar with my palette, my paints, my brushes, all of that, and um, there's nothing really to share that way, but here we are using a different palette. So this is a very inexpensive palette, and so what we're going to do is we're just going to have some fun. We're going to experiment here and try a new palette out. I've used this one before on videos going back a ways. This is a fun palette. So here I'm just mixing up some blues and greens for the water. So we're going to do this like in a glazing technique here. Lots of water. We're going to vary the colors, so I'll leave some whites on the water for some added interest through the section here. So I just sketched out a simple, coastal scene with some shacks along the water, some fishing shacks where people, they store all their fishing equipment and they tie up their boats, and a pier going out, and there's another boathouse out here. So this is like a fishing, kind of thing along the water, the coast, and I'm using all kinds of the blues and greens. Lots of water. And then I can repeat those colors down here. Repeating the same colors in your watercolors is always going to be a great technique to follow, a principle to follow. Um, Adds harmony to the painting, makes it look less broken up into pieces, so it's got more of a cohesive feeling to the painting. And then now we're going to go up to the top section and we'll go into some blues, maybe some purples. Orange, maybe we'll make some kind of a grayish color, maybe a little black. Some brown, a little bit of green, a little bit of purple. And we'll mix some greens here with a little bit of blue. I'm sticking with a larger brush here. Then I'm going to go into some yellow. Okay, a little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow. So we'll make a little nice contrast, some complementary color up here. And again, I'm trying to mix the colors a little bit. Like I don't want to use one solid yellow. I'm trying to mix yellow, orange, maybe a little bit of red, just to break it up a little bit so it's not all this just one color, one hue. And then I'm really careful around this darker color I put in, so I'm just going to leave this and let that go for now. That would probably be an awkward joining of the two washes where the dark is and then this lighter wash above. So if you're ever in question about what's going to happen if you think your colors are going to bleed and have a problem, you can leave a space in there, the paper, leave a white space, a dry space, and then when it dries later you can go back in and do another wash to join those two parts together, and it's not really going to look, it'll look fine. Whereas if you take a chance and try to do it now, as you see where I'm at this part of the painting, I put this darker wash in actually just a short time ago, and then I went over with these golden sky colors. If I was to try to blend those two areas, or that line so to speak, that could be a big issue there. It might bleed and cause a lot of blossoming and unpleasant looking happenings on the paper. So instead I just leave that dry, the paper there dry, and then I'll come back later and do another wash of that golden orangey color, and I'll just make those up. And then here we're looking pretty good. We have the water completed. That looks pretty good. I'll put a touch of that orange here and there in the water. Again, we're going to try to repeat some colors throughout, so we'll do that. We'll touch in some of that color that I mixed, the gold and the orange. We'll just put a little bit of that in the here and there, and that'll tie everything together. And now we're at the point where we should let this dry. We might take a smaller brush now. I'll do this. I'll take a smaller brush and I'll go in and maybe I'll do some finer details while it's still wet here. I can kind of pick and choose where I'm going to leave my whites for interesting highlights. Certain areas I think are going to stay dark, so we'll go back in and we'll do the majority of the darks, like the trees and the telephone poles and the pier. So we'll go in with our darks once this all dries. So now I'm just trying to maybe tidy up some spots where I left some whites. I'd like to do that. I'd like to leave some whites here and there, and I did. And so now I'm just maybe filling in a few white parts of the paper that I think I can do to kind of just neaten it up a little bit. Sometimes when we're doing our larger washes, we sacrifice a little more detail. So here we're gonna just go back and fix a few spots here and there. You have time to do that now while we're waiting for the other parts to dry. So let's do this. Let's let this dry. I'll do a few more, just picking up those same blue and grayed down blue colors. I'll put those in I'm thinking the light is coming from this direction, so the sunlight will probably touch along the left sides of these buildings here. So this shade side of these buildings won't have any white highlights. So we can do those as well. We can fill those in. That might have a little bit of light there. And I think I can also put some of that orangey color across the wooden here, some here. And we have time to work. We have time to blend in some paint. I could probably start. This is where, as you work with watercolors and you get more familiar, and I'm sure many of you are really, you know, very familiar with watercolor and you're painting right along beautifully and you have the feel for it. Some of you that are newer, you're still figuring out some of the technical stuff that goes along with watercolors. So here's a part where you can start going in and maybe putting in some darker darks. Sometimes I have copyright issues, and that's why I don't show you the photograph that I'm working from. I'm working from a photograph. So there we have a nice watery wash. We could put that in the dark there. That's no problem. But the best bet now is to let this dry. We'll come back once this is dry. And we'll start working with our darker darks. Okay, also see now this is where, again, when you're working with watercolors, you can sometimes when you're working you can if you see things drying in a certain area like over here, then you can go back in and so here it's safe to go back in and do some washes here. All right, so we've pretty much will be a lot better now to let this dry fully. I encourage everybody take some risks sometimes when you're working with your watercolors and blend and go back in and add some washes here and there. But a big part of watercolor is figuring out those drying times on the paper and what you can do with how much time you have left. And so here I know I'm much better just letting this dry fully and then coming back in and finishing up the painting versus trying to keep going because there's still a lot of damp areas and wet areas on this paper, and there's sometimes some unpleasant marks that can start to happen when we work with the paper when it's wet like this. So the main portion of what we had here is done. Our first wash is completed and we have a few darks going in. Let's let this dry and we'll come back. So we'll see you in just a few minutes and we'll work in our darker tonal values and start putting the rest of the painting together.